Hello everyone, it's Martha Burgess Novak. I'm so glad to be with you today. We're going to be talking about how to be happy. There are some wonderful books on happiness out there. There's one that I'm taking a lot of this talk today on called Learn Optimism. What is the other one called? Authentic Happiness, which I think is almost a better book than Learned Optimism. They were both by Martin Seligman, or Seligman, I think. Seligman was probably the name. He's a PhD. I think I've said before that I can use all information for what I do for a living. My work is energy work and consciousness and enlightenment. So I don't know whether this book is considered pop psychology. I would imagine it is, just simply because it was written by a PhD. The business of psychology is a little funny about that. I find validity in this. I don't find consciousness necessarily in it the way it's written, and that is no criticism, because this was written for masses of people. I think it's doing a lot of good in the world, and I think he has some real valid points. But as usual, I'm changing things just a little bit, because our job here is consciousness and enlightenment, and we've got to talk in that language. So I'm going to use a lot of his material as a launching off ground for us, and I want you to know that, because if you are interested in following up on this, anything I say, and keep in mind in 90 minutes I can't give you the whole book and my spin on things, but I think it is certainly worth reading. Again, I like both the books, but I think Authentic Happiness, which I believe is his second book, puts everything more succinctly. You know, I think all of us get excited about what we're writing, we get it out there, but over time we actually consider, find more evidence, have done more research, and it becomes more articulate and specific, therefore more helpful. So that's what we're going to talk about today, how to be happy. Certainly this is from his book that I find very helpful. Now let's do a little prayer, get us all on the same page. I want to remind you this is a live show today. We're at 347-850-1647. We're on Blog Talk Radio and Facebook Live. I hope both feeds stay up. If they do not, because where I am, our speed is slow. If I lose you on one, please open my website and punch the other button so you don't lose any of this material. I think material is important. I want you all, certainly, to start thinking about your lives relative to this. And I'm going to tell you a story to open in just a moment about a man who needed this information and went, oh, I get it. Okay, so let's do our prayer. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we thank you so much as we are here today listening to the show, as I am speaking this show. Open us to the truth that lies in your enlightenment beyond our fears for just 90 minutes. And show us what we are indeed capable of and what we need to look for and observe and be aware of and change, that we may live happier lives full of talent and fulfillment in the use of what we know. We are grateful, dear God, for the opportunity to come together in community. Thank you so much for this, for the relationships we all have with each other, even if we've never seen each other before. Because there's a unity in spirit that is wonderful. Dear God, we say this prayer now in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends. And in the name of each and every person listening to this show, we pray now that we know nothing, that we'll let it go. For it is you, the you, through us and through all things, that know it all. We heed that inner voice. We cooperate with it, dear God, for we know we won't be happy unless we do. And this is the base of deeper consciousness. We thank you so much, and so it is. Amen. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh, hello. Well, Bill, aren't you sweet to say that? Thank you. And good morning, Kat. Those of you that are on Blog Talk Radio, I want you to know that dear friends of mine are writing me on Facebook Live, and I am delighted. Thank you so much, and it's always so good to hear from you all. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. So, I have a very dear client, and in my sessions, in my private sessions with people, I always ask, my job is multifold. My job is to teach consciousness and enlightenment, specifically to you, my client at the time. I'm putting you in that position right now. My job is to protect you and not tell you what to do and not advise you, but to wake you up to better and better decisions. My job is to help you make more money. My job is to help you be happier in the world. And my job is to free you from the past so you can fully live in the present. All those are nice things to say, all right? But one of my jobs, too, is to ask very much, what are you noticing this week? What's going on this week? What, if you had a magic wand and could wave it over yourself, what would you want me to work on? Because I'm supposed to help you with that. This client said, and I'm going to pretty much quote what he said to me. He said, I would like help with accepting that when it's easy, when life is easy, he means, when there is no hardship, that it is safe. When it's going well, I think something's going to happen that's bad. Things go well, and then there's a tragedy. Things then go well again, and then there's another tragedy. It's going to take months to fix the problem every time there is a tragedy. He went on. My experience tells me spoilers occur. Now that's a very important sentence. My experience tells me that spoilers occur. I want you to know that one of our issues, one of the cognitive distortions that we so defined several weeks ago, was that what happened then is bound to happen now because the past dictates the present and the future. That's what he means by this. My experience tells me that spoilers occur. He went on. There is a belief in me that my life is permanently associated with spoilers. When things are going well, I want you to note the word permanently. It's going to tell us a lot. I'm going to come back to that. He said, and I'm going to repeat that sentence. There is a belief in me that my life is permanently associated with spoilers when things are going well. It's a reflexive belief, meaning that he has no control of it, which is not true, all right? He's saying these things just automatically happen. Not true. Okay, he went on to say, okay, that's what he said. I'm sorry, I didn't observe my end of quotes. I should put on my glasses, but, there they are. I don't know, I didn't know where they were. Okay, here we go. Now, he was very surprised, and that's the reason I'm starting here with the show, even though I had planned to talk about this. He was very surprised to find out that this is more than just, Martha, take this little, this little issue away from me. Because what it revealed in his dialogue, and I've also observed him for quite a while, And keep in mind, my philosophy is if you're bringing it up to me, you're ready to lose it. You're ready to release this. And so it gives me permission to talk all about it to you, where if I had talked about this a year ago to him, he would have rejected it. He would have dismissed it. He wouldn't have been ready to do it. We got him ready to do this next leg of healing. And of course, the information comes before the healing. The wisdom always comes before the healing, because what is really true about us is we have to give ourselves choices. And to give ourselves a real choice, we've got to open ourselves to really seeing what we're doing and realize the benefits and the disadvantages to our lives. When something is an issue, there's a momentary, what do I want to say? There's a momentary soothing, there's a momentary feel good, there's a momentary, well, at least I know where the rocks and the waters are, so I'm going to stick with the familiar instead of the unknown. A fear of change. There are all sorts of these things going on, and there are infinite numbers of them. What yours are, we can find out, but you probably already know. So there are infinite numbers of those things that keep us from moving into change, growth, and opportunity is always in change and growth. Okay. Now, where I want to go with this is something that these books are about in terms of authentic happiness, to use this title, which is a very good one. And that is this. There are pessimists in the world, and there are optimists in the world. There are some very distinct characteristics of each, and I'm going to give you those characteristics today. We're also going to tell you what to do about them, okay? So you can start making those changes in your life, but I'll tell you the first thing that I want you to do about the information that I'm going to present to you today. Oops. All right, this is Schnitzel. He's apparently coming to visit us, and gave up because I have a cup of tea in my lap instead of him. And you know, Schnitzel's real funny. He is the one cat that is here all the time. And I think he's going to go over and sit near this because he likes to, I don't know whether he just likes the droning sound of my voice or what, but he's usually here for healings. So pessimists and optimists are below this. Now, here's what's more challenging to do. That's not an issue that we can just take away and throw in the can. It is a pervasive way you look at the world, at yourself, at everything that happens to you, at other people. It's the idea you have about your God and family and many more things. Now, I want to repeat something that I said last week. I had given my advanced class, and you can read about being in my classes on the internet if you would like. I would love to train more of you to do this work. So if you're interested, I want you to know you're going to be training for several years, but it is so worth it, and your life does change. It's not an airy-fairy thing to say. My clients, every one of these men and women that you will see that are currently available to do this work with you, would all say their lives are different. So in my advanced class, and some of these people have been with me anywhere from 14 to 18 years, in fact, most of them, not that they didn't work a long time ago, okay, but we have ongoing classes. We have to continue to learn to help people like we're supposed to. So I gave them a test. I think it was last week. I gave them a test Saturday a week ago. And this test was to see how happy they were. And everybody scored really high. Wow. So I said, what do you conclude from that? And they all had one thing to say, and that is, I am very happy, except for the cognitive distortions. Go back and listen to those radio shows. It was a series. Except for the cognitive distortions that I continue to indulge in, out of unawareness, out of choice, not really choice, but reaction, because I'm going for the momentary fix instead of the lifetime gains. See, that's where I'm going right now. Oh, hello, Kelly. I'm so glad you joined us this morning. We do cognitive distortions. Please go back and listen to those shows. There was a lot of repetitions because I really wanted to explain those things well. There are a lot of cognitive distortions, and when we use them over and over and over again, we build up a momentum. We convince ourselves psychologically that we need them. They give us a momentary fix. Sometimes it's negative, and we don't get the momentary fix doing what we do, but we get the momentary fix in how we soothe ourselves after doing what we do that's so negative for ourselves. See? Isn't that amazing? All sorts of ways we deceive ourselves and we fool ourselves. So, we're going to talk about changing your mindset. This is the first part, probably, of a series. I'm probably going to talk more about this next week and in a little more detail, because I think it's an important show. Pessimists are up to 8 times more likely to become depressed when bad things happen than optimists. Isn't that interesting? They do worse at school, in sports, and in jobs. They have worse physical health, and there's evidence that's coming forth now to say they even have shorter lives. Now, of course, there are always exceptions to the rule, all right? They also have more difficult relationships, and this has been statistically proven. Hi, Pat. Oh, let's see. What have you said? Oh, you're so sweet. I just love that. Pat is calling me his Sunday morning princess. I love that. That's very cute. Thank you, darling. That means a lot to me that you all like me and like this show. I love you all too. All right, so let's go back now to what we're talking about. Pessimists and optimists. And whether you think in terms of one or the other, even though you haven't before applied these terms to your mindset, it has everything to do with being happy or unhappy. Now, there are several things that I want to teach you about pessimists, and there are several things I want to teach you about optimists, and the play between the two. Because the interesting thing is nobody is decidedly one or the other, especially if you're doing consciousness work, because you're beginning to wake up to getting the way life works, and yet you're still doing some of the old things, okay? So you can be a total pessimist, a total optimist, or you can be somewhere in the middle going back and forth. I'm not sure anybody is a total anything in my life, because I observe people a lot. And there are some very authentic moments in the most deceived people. And so I think that my philosophy these days is everybody just try their best and keep learning and keep growing and don't be afraid to make changes, and it's all going to get better. And where you are right now is 100% okay, because it's the start of where you're going to be tomorrow. So, here's some things about pessimists I want you to know. Now, may I make a suggestion to you all? And I'm not trying to tell you what to do. I'm not somebody that has ever been able to hear something and retain it. I am somebody that needs to write it down to get it. And if you are one of those people, we're about to say some pretty complicated and interesting things. And, oh, thank you so much, darling. And you certainly might like to write those things down and take some notes on this show. So please, if that is you, sitting in front of your computer or get a pen and paper and write. And I'll try to I'm going to repeat some things in here so you can write important points down. I'm going to try not to go through like a racehorse, which I sometimes do. All right. Pessimists. Pessimists have a triad that they usually employ that sinks them. They can use one of these items in the triad. They can use two or three. There are more than this, but the primary triad is this. They take things personally. I'm going to explain all these in a lot of detail. Number two, they make things, they have it in their mind that every bad situation is going to be permanent, and they believe that their bad is pervasive. Now, those are the three words, the three P's I want you to remember about pessimistic thinking. There are a lot more I'm about to give you, and I want to go into these in a little more detail. They take things personally. Pessimists often feel that whatever happens is their fault. I know a woman who came from such a crazy and chaotic home that did not make any reasonable sense at all, that she would just volunteer to take the blame for everybody so peace could be restored. She did this when she was a little girl. She's still doing this. This, she perceives, keeps her safe. So when something goes wrong at work, even though she has nothing to do with it, when something is said in passing, even though it has nothing to do with her, it's just some general frustration being expressed, she's to blame. All right. Pessimists feel concerning this personalizing, when bad things happen, we internalize and we blame ourselves, or we can externalize and blame other people. And this is what generally happens with pessimists. People who blame themselves really come up with low self-esteem as a consequence. However, one of the things I want you to know is blaming others really doesn't help you either, because what you're doing is, the whole reason you're doing that is on some deeper level of you are blaming yourself. So it's a colossal cover-up. When one is blaming oneself, and that is the bottom line of this personalization, pessimists become married to, and married is a real important word. That means there's very little separation between the truth and this cognitive distortion, that they are worthless, talentless, unlovable, and fill in the blanks. Optimists tend to blame external events, and they don't lose as much self-esteem, by the way. They like themselves better, basically, on the inside than pessimists do. And they don't just go around blaming others. That's not what I'm implying about optimists. But they have a more, and this is where consciousness comes in, global point of view. So the passing remark that comes by is about the situation, about the pressure that that person is under, about how anybody under that kind of pressure might say something like that, and about a very big word here, forgiveness. because it isn't personal at all. Somebody was just stressed. Unfortunate that they had to take it out that way. But it has nothing to do with you and who you are. We're always, guys, trying to protect the self. We did that when we were little kids. The problem comes when we're still doing that as adults. Because you don't need to be protected anymore. You need to be wise. You need to think globally. You need to open your mind to who your God really is, that is you. That's the only one you can use. After all, you can't have my God, nature's God, the church's God, your friend's God. Because the God you can use is the one you are. Do you understand? All of this, all this lovely stuff that we can appreciate is part of the oneness of God. But you're part of that oneness too. And exploring this is your potential and leads to greater and greater experiences of your potential. I hope this is making sense. For those of you that might be new to me, let me say that that if everything is God, and this is the thing that confuses us about God, then God is low vibrational energies, fear-based energies, and it's high vibrational energies, love-based energies. Right? So all of it is God. There's not anything that isn't God to higher or lower degrees. The more evil we do, the lack of love we do, the more you are fear-based. The higher thought we have, which is what we do a radio show about, and what my work is about, is more love-based. But it's all God. We can let a lot of this energy in, or we can get very little in, and truncate the love to choose fear. And here's the interesting thing. Fear is very familiar to everybody, and human nature is to choose the familiar over the unknown. Thank you for that heart. Do you understand? That's human nature. But it doesn't give you a happy life. That's pessimism. One of the things we haven't talked about yet, that's really important in this exercise that we're talking about today, is that optimists are able to manifest their lives in ways they want much better than pessimists that tend to manifest their lives in ways that are familiar but not optimal. Okay, that said, let's move on. So that's taking things personally. I hope I explained it well. We'll probably talk about that a little later on too in this show. Well, absolutely. Kelly, I will be your friend. Thank you. All right, let's talk about permanence. Do you remember what my client said? Let me go back to that. There is a belief in me that my life is permanently associated with spoilers when things are going well. Tells you right there. Something, right? All right. When bad things happen, and I keep in mind the good and bad are put in quotes here throughout the show, and I'll explain this once. There are no good and bad things. They're just things. And it is our judgment on them that makes them good or bad because we cognitively label. Do you understand? This is one of my things about this book. He describes things as bad, as good. Well, that's fine. We know what he's talking about. But it is our labeling of them. And if we're going to study consciousness, we have to remember that things just are neither good nor bad. It is our spin that we're putting on them. And we need to draw ourselves back from that and see what God is telling us and go with the energy that we think is inherent in that to be cooperative. Wow. That's consciousness. So you're going to hear me use some of his language from time to time, but I'm wanting to give you ours at the same time. So pessimists believe in permanence, that terrible things will last a long time or be permanent. Now, I want to explain to you why everybody feels that way on some level of their being until you change the pessimism to optimism. And can you? Absolutely. I wouldn't be doing this show if you couldn't. Okay, we're on the same page there. So let's talk about how this even forms. Little tiny children, infants, before 18 months old, have no sense of past and future. They're like little animals. Please don't be offended by that. We're all little animals in our basic nature. And in the respect that all time is now. All time is now. If I tell my dog we're going for a walk in 2 hours, means nothing. It's either now or never, right? Kids are this way. Little infants are this way until you're 18 months old. Now, why 18 months old? 18 months old is when enough bad things have happened in the past for you to, for everybody to, form a defense mechanism to protect us. The defense mechanism is the ego, and the part of us that thinks like a child, which is the ego child's mind, the ECM, you often hear me referring to, the egoic child's mind. That's what happens at 18 months old. So how that serves us is then we see, we have the cellular experience of all these bad things, hurtful things that have happened before that time, and we start scanning the future. That's what the ego and the ego child's mind can do. This is the gift that we get from it, to protect us from things that could happen in the present and the future, mainly the future, based on the past. And we are not in the present where the creative possibilities are. This is why all of us as adults struggle so with bringing ourselves out of past thinking and into the present, because our ego child's minds are still trying to protect us by looking ahead too far in the future and scaring us based on our experiences in the past that we fear may come again. And we live a limited life instead of the dynamic present where we know we're protected because we're listening to God in this moment and cooperative with our highest selves that keep us, by the way, on the cutting edge of change all the time. That keeps us safe. I can give you a million examples of this in my own life. I mean, there are several that are flashing through my mind right now. Real important. This gift of mindfulness that we hear so much about, they don't tell you how to do it. Just stay in the present. Ain't that easy, kids? It just isn't. Because that's not our egoic natures. We've got to train ourselves to be mindful and stay in the present, where all the advantages are. Okay. Now, let's talk about, let me say this one thing as a postscript to what I just said. So before 18 months old, when the ego and the ego child's mind starts, all time is now. So anything that happened to you, whether it was really egregious that someone did to you, or whether it was something like an uncomfortable wet diaper that you were in too long, or not being fed on time, we interpret that in our child's mind, because all time is now, as it will last forever. It's a permanent condition because you know nothing else. This happens to everybody, and you did not escape. So with most people, there's an element of permanence there that we must challenge. Now, what's the opposite of permanence? That it's temporary, right? And that it is specific to the situation. Two things. So let's look at some examples of this right now. A pessimistic, permanent thing to say is, and these are, by the way, Dr. Seligman's, I think it's Seligman's. A permanent pessimistic viewpoint is to say, I'm all washed up. Now open your mind a minute. What would you say is the optimist? It's temporary and it's specific. I'd say, I'm exhausted today. Real different from I'm all washed up, which is absolutely permanent, pessimistic. And notice something else, universal. Universal. And by that I mean pervasive. You see? Let's do another one. I've got a few of them here that I copied down from his book. But I've changed some of them because I'm changing them to a more conscious viewpoint in the optimist. So, permanent, pessimistic. Diets never work. Optimist, temporary, specific. The Mediterranean diet works for me. It's better than the others. Okay. Another one. You always nag. Optimistic, again, about a situation, temporary. You nag when I don't stack the pans the way you want me to. I'm going through these in this kind of detail, ladies and gentlemen, so that you can see what comes out of your mouth in the next few weeks. This is really important because I'm not with you, and I'm delighted to entertain you on Sunday mornings. But I wouldn't be doing this if I didn't know you can change. You can make your life better, but you're going to have to open your awareness to what you're saying, doing, and thinking so these things can be changed. You see? Here's another one. My boss is a jerk. Pessimistic. No conditional things at all to that, right? But the more optimistic, the temporary and specific, says something to the effect of, he has many fine qualities, but he's not a very motivating leader in this respect. See, we're not telling the truth. I'm wanting to point this out to you because being an optimist has nothing to do with being a Pollyanna. Do you know Pollyanna? It's gotten to be a psychological term. It was a kid's book about a little girl that had a perfectly terrible early life. And now she was just happy all the time. And just saw everything just so positive and so wonderful. And it worked for her. It was one of those dear books that my mother gave me when I was a child, and I look back on now and think, maybe that wasn't such a great book, to give me, because certainly this was an issue of mine when I grew up, as I was growing up. This work, and what I talk to you all about every week, is based in reality. There's something more important than being a good man or a good woman. Do you realize that? It's being a real one. That's the most important thing. being an authentic one. And knowing that you are good within that large arena of you. Real is good. So we're not talking about everything just being wonderful. Nope, not at all. It is the reality and the observation that everything really is 100% okay. That's the conclusion everybody comes to in consciousness. It's all 100% okay. Something bad happens and we go to 100% okay because God exists right here. It's got me, this energy. It's all I am. It's going to sustain me. It's going to open my mind. I have to see past the heartbreak or the disappointment. That's the optimistic viewpoint. Okay. You keep in mind when we have talked about this, we talk about the narrowing of focus on the issue, right? Or the opening to more. I'm going to give you an example. I know I'm a little off the subject here, but I am talking about consciousness. And I think about death when we lose a loved one. The interesting thing about death is that it forces you to love more because it is letting go, in letting go, that you love more than keeping someone with you. So it expands our capacity to love, doesn't it? But the pessimist is going to focus on the death and the grief and the change that they can't do very well, and the horror and anything else that you want to add to that. And the optimist is going to actually find joy and gratitude in the fact that such a great person was in their lives and such a great experience, and an experience they learned and grew from and continue to learn and grow because of that experience, you see? One of the words we have not necessarily used yet in this talk about being happy is that it makes you, optimism makes you more resilient. That doesn't mean you're not going to be knocked off your horse once in a while. You will be. That's life. But how fast you get back on it has everything to do with what your mindset is. Let's keep going. I have one more example. Let's see if you can come up with this. I'm going to be quiet for a minute. So here's the permanent pessimistic viewpoint. You never talk to me. See if you can come up with a temporary and specific optimistic statement based on you never talk to me. Think about it a minute. Cardinal sin in radio, dead space, but I just gave it to you. I thought it was important. I came up with, for my temporary optimistic viewpoint, we haven't had a good talk in about 3 days. Let's talk. Or tell me when's a good time. You understand? I'm needing for you to notice when you think bad things are permanent. Now, let's go to pervasiveness, which I have referred to in this exercise. I think I've given you some real good examples of this, if I'm not mistaken. I did not. Okay. Silly me. Well, I've just given you some examples, so we'll just go with those. But let's talk about pervasiveness in more detail. Pessimists believe that whatever is bad is pervasive, and they let it, and this is what we mean by pervasive, affect every aspect of their lives. So you lose your job, and you just can't recover from losing your job because you have a bad things being pervasive is your mentality, and so you come home and you destroy your relationship with your loved one because of that. Keep in mind, an optimist sees it specifically. I have lost my job and I got to find another job, but it's not going to affect my home life. You see, you're going to emotionally label, you're going to emotionally stack labels on that all are self-attacks when you're a pessimist. You're going to say, I've lost my job, so you got a subconscious programming going on that I'm not any good, I'm talentless, I'm worthless, nobody thinks I'm worth keeping, everybody throws me out, I'm no damn good, and you bring that home. And it's like garbage, right? It infects, it smells up everything you touch. Is it true? No. The bottom line, the truth is, you've lost your job. Let's learn from it. Let's find something else to do that is more in keeping. It means, spiritually, it means energetically, that was no longer an energetic fit for you. And if you think you're going to keep something that's no longer an energetic fit, you've got another thing coming, because this universe, this whole world is about energy matching. You didn't match. Where's the self-attack in that? There's no self-attack. Get yourself ready for the next thing. Find something that does match. Don't you understand that it is our labeling of these things and our putting emotional attachments on things that are self-attack that ruin every part of our lives? If you are worthless, well, you're worthless as an employee, and you're worthless as a husband and a wife, you're worthless as a parent, you're worthless as... What's the point? There's always a sense of futility, by the way. Everybody comes in and says, I'm futile. And it's like, well, what do you expect is in the egoic child's mind? Pessimism is just what you see on the surface. You get it? We've got to change this. Okay. Pessimists believe, we're back to pervasiveness, that bad events, they're cognitively distorting this instead of just accepting the event and making the most of it, you see. Bad events will undermine everything they do. That's a belief. That's pervasiveness. Pessimists make universal explanations for their failures, and they give up on everything when failure strikes one area. They give up on everything when failure strikes one area. By the way, optimists make specific explanations for events like this. And they may become helpless in that one part of their lives for a little while, but they're able to function in all the others pretty well. I was just thinking of something, and that is, I was very close to my dear mother. She died in 1990 of a very serious illness, spinal cancer, ghastly. And I kept teaching because my work is important to me, and it was lovely what Spirit had me do, because I was certainly in trauma, and when we're in trauma, our energy actually moves to the side of us, out of our bodies, because the physical environment is under such stress and in such pain, psychological or otherwise, that we disassociate from ourselves. It's a natural phenomenon, as a matter of fact. And I remember teaching acting classes. I had an acting school back then and had business classes all the time as well. And I remember standing up in front of everybody and saying, "Where's my energy?" And everybody could tell where it is, because I was such a great example of disassociation. By the way, this is one of the things that a bad actor doesn't do. If they're playing a disassociated character and they're not disassociated, they're quite centered, it doesn't work. You don't believe them. You've got to make these energetic changes to be real, you see. So optimists see bad things specifically. Just as the story I just gave you, it was, I was disassociated, and there was something to learn and for me to teach and share with people. In a very bad circumstance, I tried to make the most of feeling helpless and alone and sad when my mother died. I was also joyous, and for having known such a wonderful woman, and grateful. You all get it. One of the things I want you to realize now, as we're talking about this, that the permanence that we just talked about before we talked about pervasiveness. Permanence determines how long a person gives up for your belief in that. Permanent explanations for bad events produce long-lasting helplessness, and temporary explanations produce resilience. There's that word again. It's a good one. I remember taking a personality test when I was very young. And the personality test didn't say I was the smartest, didn't say I was the most talented or this or that. They said my high point was adaptability. Oh, I was so disappointed with that. And you know what? I didn't know what adaptability was. Life hadn't happened in its extremes to me yet, and I didn't know how important that was. I do now. I'm certainly content being exactly who I am and having adaptability and always being open to more. Going back. Universal explanations for bad happenings produce helplessness across many situations, and specific explanations produce helplessness only in the troubled arena. That's what I'm wanting you all to realize about that. So please start watching your language. Start seeing what you believe under what you say. Start noticing your thoughts, because these are not just coming out in your words, they're coming out in the words you say to yourself, which is the most insidious thing of all. Okay. I've noticed for years that pessimists also give external reasons for their success. They have a very hard time saying, I did that. I used to do that. I used to want to be humble, because that was this very spiritual thing to do, right? No, that was false spirituality. Well, I'm so glad somebody is saying this is so helpful. Thank you. Oh, aren't you a dear one? Thank you so much for saying that. I'm so glad. I want you to know that that was a false humility, this humbleness. And what Spirit told me in my meditations was that they have to work through people. They have to work through you. They work through you. They work through me. If you're going to thank me for anything, thank me for eating my vegetables and getting enough sleep and, trying to be the best channel I can given the way I live. That's all I'm doing. You, by the way, are absolutely no different. We prepare ourselves to be the best channel we can be for the highest version of God through us. Everybody's channeling. Do you understand? That's what talk is. Talk is channeling, but you're either channeling your egoic child's mind or you're channeling the love of God in the highest self. That's it. Nobody's magical here, and everybody's magical here, but not in the terms of magical thinking. This is very real. And all we're doing today is trying to make you very aware of how you're thinking and how you're feeling and the decisions you're making based on that might need scrutiny. So you can have a decision then not to react anymore, but to change. Good. This giving external reasons for success isn't particularly healthy, guys. We all work hard. We should have some pats on the back. The most important pat on the back you can give yourself, though, is the one you give yourself. I gave it away in that sentence. That's the way I tell a joke, by the way, too. I always start with the punchline. I'm terrible at that. And we run around trying to get kudos from other people because we don't have that security in ourselves that we're doing a good enough job. That's a cognitive distortion. Go back and listen to that. You're fine the way you are. You're fine the way you are. Just keep growing and changing and making the most of the opportunities that are inherent in that. And that isn't a brain activity. That's a mind activity, which is the larger mind. This is how this client of mine needs to think. You see? He has formed a world in his head based on permanence and pervasiveness, and that everything is personal, instead of realizing it's not like that at all. And interestingly enough, I see a lot of people struggle with this change and growth and opportunity because they don't want to give up the fact that they have just been wrong up until now. Now that's an egoic thought too, because nothing's wasted. Nothing's ever wrong. We're on a journey and it leads us somewhere. There are no mistakes if we learn from them. Okay. It's about moving on. It's about recognizing our patterns and saying, there it is, and not vilifying ourselves with that, but allowing change and cooperation with the higher self. It's a nice life when you do that. Okay. External reasons for success. I know many people that turn away from compliments, that they diminish them, instead of saying, yeah, I did a pretty good job there. I did. I worked hard. Great. I did it. And letting themselves feel good about that. And then they wonder why they're depressed. Guys, everything's relative here. Sweeties, we're all selfish as hell and we're all generous. We all can love altruistically, and we can love in real small, proprietary ways. We're all everything, because this is who we are as God, because God is everything. And we're the aspect of God known as you, as me. Why not accept it all? Because it is in the acceptance of the light and the dark in us. Notice I'm not saying good, bad, but the light and dark in us, the fear and the love, that we have the clear, distinctive choice to be more. All right, let's keep going. The pessimist really believes in their helplessness. They feel they are helpless. They feel they're helpless, which is a very personal thing. They feel they are helpless, and they're permanently so. And that they are helpless, and it pervades every aspect of their lives. This is learned helplessness. We learn it in our childhood. It is a giving up reaction, a quitting response that follows from the belief that whatever you do doesn't matter. That's really important, that whatever you do doesn't matter. Now, one of the things I want to point out, that in consciousness, that's the antithesis of what your highest consciousness believes. Because in higher consciousness, you believe there hasn't been one moment wasted in your whole life. Not one thought, not one second of belief, of action, or anything else. Nothing has been wasted. There is no such thing as a wasted life. You say, but how can that be? Well, it's what you're holding against yourself. It's how you framed it. And it's simply not true. Everything leads us somewhere else. Sometimes it leads us in the toilet, but that doesn't mean that your soul isn't growing, does it? So we have to be very careful in our judgment of other people and how they're living and what they need to do for their soul growth. Does it look great on the surface? Do we say, that's not a dynamic life? Of course we do. Don't do that. And certainly, don't do that with yourself. The true thing is absolutely not a moment is wasted. Everything matters. Every moment of you matters. Now, the whole point is to keep going and let it evolve so that everything that you know and all your wisdom comes together in some dynamic whole where you accept the light and the dark and everything. And you're making wise and loving decisions in your life. That's why it's different from nothing I do matters. Do you get this? So we've got to learn not to be helpless anymore. And if that is in your mind in some way, that I'm helpless against everything, we've got to change it. There is a term that Dr. Seligman uses, and it is called explanatory style. And explanatory style, I think, is a really good term. It's the manner in which you habitually explain to yourself why events happen. That's his quote. And he goes on to say that it's a great modulator of learned helplessness. I believe it is. But an optimistic explanatory style absolutely will stop helplessness in its tracks. A pessimistic explanatory style exaggerates it, in my opinion, and spreads it, and the results are not good. Another word for helplessness is passivity. You learn to become passive as a kid, and it pays off. I've seen certainly this in nursing homes. It's really interesting. My father had Alzheimer's. My mom was quite independent. My dad, too, to a certain extent. But I would go to, I spent a lot of time in assisted living communities, and it was so interesting to observe older people because whatever they did or did not do in terms of their growth when they were young, man is in your face when they're older. And if people learned helplessness and learned that they could get other people to do for them, they're still doing that. And if people learn to be more independent, they're still doing that. So you can work the system that way, or you can become passive if you give up completely, if you absolutely believe that nothing you do matters. Explanatory style is more than just a way of explaining negative events, by the way. It's a habit of thought. And you learned it when you were a little kid in childhood, before you were 7 or 8 years old. It stems from your view of your place in the world and whether you think you are valuable or whether you think you're worthless. This certainly is the hallmark of whether you are a pessimist or an optimist. Your relationship to yourself, what you think about yourself. When I go back to consciousness, I want to remind you of what I said. We're everything. I'm worthless. I am. I'm also immensely valuable. I'm both, and so are you. What do you see more of? Why not just see it all and say I'm everything and stop working so hard at it? Pessimists do blame, and they blame mostly transient causes. Mood, effort, they use the word sometimes a lot, there can be a little bit of paranoia in there, because they expect things to go poorly, or they believe in thwarts. Optimists don't believe in thwarts. We believe in life. We know that there are many things that are challenges to us. But nothing's a thwart. It's simply a door that may be closed permanently, or it looks like it's closing, and we get to open our minds and see our direction in God. That's all it means. Not a thwart, but a challenge to look more closely. Optimists believe that bad events are temporary and surmountable. They're just challenges to be overcome. They bounce back quickly. They regain their footing. Defeat is just a temporary setback. It calls us, if you are into consciousness, to look more deeply at what the energy is doing. For example, one loses one's job and realizes, I've been talking for 2 years now that this wasn't a fit. What do I expect? Let's go find the fit. You understand? It causes us to learn something. Well, I didn't do that well. What can I do better? I didn't do this interview well. What can I improve? But many times what pessimists do is they flagellate themselves, right? And they can do that as a use of energy, or they can learn something. It's all the same energy. It's the investment of it that's important here and defines the optimist or the pessimist. Optimists believe that when a defeat happens, the cause is confined to this specific thing. This specific thing. There's no universal cause. No. I didn't do this interview well because I did this. Not, I never interview well. You see, optimists believe that defeat is not their own fault. They attribute it to other factors, and sometimes there's several. Didn't feel well that day. The set of circumstances just wasn't right for me. It wasn't a good match. I couldn't find a rapport with someone. All right. Optimists tend to think of defeat or bad things happening as a challenge. And it motivates them to learn something, to grow, to talk to people, to reach out, to try harder, to change tactics, to listen to God and the inner and what it's telling them. They explain good events to themselves in terms of permanent causes. Now, this is how to use permanence. That it is your innate traits and abilities and character that made you succeed. It's who you are. It's what you created. You should take credit for that. You're a good person, but you shouldn't need me to tell you that. I urge you to find that out for yourself and not pretend to be a good person. It's a happier life. And optimists, and I think this is an important one, they find temporary and specific causes for misfortune. And Dr. Seligman goes on to say, this is the art of hope. I'm going to repeat that. They find temporary and specific causes for misfortune. And this is the art of hope. I like that. Now let me say again, people who are pessimists can learn to be optimists. You must change how you're thinking about things relative to some of the things that I've just mentioned to you. Watch your language. That's a really good one. You see, there are consequences to your mindsets, which one you're going to choose. Thank you so much. Oh, dear hearts, I love you, and thank you so much for all of your marvelous support. There are consequences. Pessimists give up more easily and get depressed more often. Optimists do better in school, work, and sports. They exceed predictions, by the way, on aptitude tests. Their health is usually good. They're more popular. They're more fun to be around. They age well. As I said in the beginning of the show, they even live longer. Some of the experiences now, some of the stats are proving. If it's good, pessimists say it's temporary, it's specific, and I had nothing to do with it. A pessimistic viewpoint stops you from developing momentum for something better. And it stops you from taking advantage of good situations that are opening up for you and keeping them rolling, you see? Now, we only have 13 more minutes, but I want to give you some of this. We're going to talk about this again next week in a little more detail. There are several things that you can work on to contribute to optimism. If you recognize yourself as a pessimist, you've got to change the momentum of your thinking. So, number one, I do urge you to stop living in the past. We talk about this a lot on this show. You have to become more aware of when you're dragging the past and your past reactions because something's reminded you of that into the present. You've got to learn to stay in the present moment. It can be as easy as, and as hard, by the way, is realizing where your mind is, what you're saying to yourself. By the way, what you're saying to yourself is a hell of a lot more important than anything that anybody can say to you. You understand that? If you're being motivated by emotion of the past, you need to recognize that. You need to recognize how much you are being influenced by the past. You've got to bring your attention back to the present. You say, well, that sounds all well and good. It's nice and abstract. How do I do it? Well, let me tell you how you do it. First of all, you have to be aware you're in the past. You're thinking from the past. And then our senses, this is a real important aspect of our senses. They not only help us perceive and savor and experience the world as it is, but they bring you back to the present. Have you really looked at your environment? Use your senses. See, smell, hear, taste, touch right now. They're a key to the present moment. That's really important. So this is a basic thing. Oh, I'm going to have to yell at the dog. Topple! Excuse me. You know, I love my open house. This is an open floor plan, but in that aspect, when the squirrels or skunks or groundhogs or whatever else in the yard, oh, we find that very exciting, my dog and I. He barks, I don't. I guess I do my version. All right. Okay. Number 2 tip about all this is learn to be grateful. Now, what I wanted to say about the senses, I just remembered. That's a basic exercise. I'll give you more advanced ones when you're ready for them. But right now, just train yourself to the present moment. Realize how much you're not in the past. I mean, you're in the past or in the future. And the future is the past, by the way, you know, because of the ego child's mind scanning the future for like events, right? No, stay there. Another tip here is catch yourself catastrophizing. The pessimists catastrophize. They think of all the what ifs that are negative out there in the world, instead of just staying in the present and listening to God. That's the choice. Not, oh, I'm going to think wonderfully about everything. You don't believe that. You think everything's going to hell in a handbasket. Both of those, by the way, are fantasies. The only thing that's true is this moment of God and listening and doing what you need to do right there, because you feel it. You are being told that. All right, another tip. Learn to be grateful. Keep a gratitude journal for several weeks. Now, a lot of people say this, but I actually believe this is an important thing that help change you from a pessimist to an optimist. Choose 5 things that you're really grateful for at the end of the day and write them down. Now, you cannot give lip service to this. You can't say, yeah, I'm grateful for breathing. I'm grateful for my husband. I'm grateful for this. I'm grateful. No. This is not a casual exercise. And the problem with it not working is that people do not give it thought. They don't bring their whole thinking and feeling system to this exercise. It has to be real. It has to be authentic. It is training you to notice those little moments and be grateful for these little moments. And if you can't think of 5 sincere things at the end of your day, you simply need to get to work and train yourself to become more aware. Once in a while, I'll do quite the living exercise on gratitude. And I tell myself that I'm going to be aware of every little thing, not some of the basic things that we take for granted. I mean, I'm grateful for them, but breathing, our heart beating, that kind of thing. But I'm going to really look at how the universe is supporting me today. For example, the universe is supporting me today because this is a gorgeous day. The air is really crisp and cold. The leaves are falling off the trees. And I love these big piles of leaves everywhere. I love the crunch when I walk. I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I don't really have to go anywhere today. That I thought about putting food in my refrigerator earlier. My hamburgers are defrosting. And I have a good dinner. I'm going to look forward to seeing my precious husband at the end of this lecture and spending a relaxing day with him. I'm going to notice every single little thing that happens, which is the universe supporting me. And I'm going to see it instead of taking it for granted. Because consciousness is not the daily life that most of us live. It's the daily life that most of us miss. So don't miss it. Don't miss it now. I think gratitude is a really important thing. I've got 5 minutes, so I'm going to probably end after this, but let me say this. Gratitude's important for a lot of reasons, but let me tell you, in terms of manifestation, it's really important. And the reason is that when you're grateful, it's not just about you anymore. It opens your thinking. It's not about the narrow mind anymore. You're grateful for something outside yourself. You're grateful to other people. You're grateful to God coming through other people, which is what I always believe. Not that you have to. You're grateful for something beyond you, which, by the way, opens flow. And that makes manifestation a heck of a lot easier. It also, gratitude, increases life satisfaction, which is a big part of happiness. It amplifies good memories. The good memories that are happening right now, and makes them more intense. And if you do this enough, they'll become more frequent. And this is how to build momentum. But frequent and intense negative thought blocks your peace. And peace is another big part of your being happy. Guys, I'm going to stop right there, but I tell you what, I'm going to make a note. We're going to pick up right where we left off next week. And we're going to talk about more. I don't know how long this series will last. Sometimes I can't predict it. Depends on how fast I get through the material. But, dear hearts, let me ask you this. If you like us, we're trying to boost our numbers. Would you get this show or other shows that mean something to you? By the way, all the shows are posted on Blog Talk Radio, Facebook Live, and YouTube. We're all over it. So please be kind enough to get the word out about us. You can even, I believe you can post shows on social media to Blog Talk Radio, to the page that you're on, if you're on Blog Talk Radio. But please get the word around about us, like us, share us, follow us, anything else that you can come up with, we'd appreciate. We do these shows with a great deal of joy and intention to love you and to help. I hope you're finding that to be so. Please get on our website too, which is Martha Burgess Novak, Novak, .net, N-E-T. We are .net, not a .com. You're going to find a lot of information on that, plus my 2 books, and a lot of CDs and DVDs that are posted to that you can order and listen to. They're all about living consciously in your daily life. I thank you so much for listening to us. Let's do a quick prayer. Oh, and by the way, I need to remind you that we have an app based on my second book. It's only now for iPhones, but in a few months it'll come out for Droids. And it's 99 cents in the App Store on the iPhone. Thank you. It's called The Teacup Prophecies. Dear God, who is all there is, you who are all we are, and all everything is in this world, we are so grateful for our listeners, for our God, for the experience of God that we all are, for this beautiful world in which we 90 seconds. In which we contribute and in which we participate. We are very grateful. We thank you so much, dear God. Now, open our awareness that we may see what we're doing, that we may make better and more positive choices for our lives, that we may be happier people. Because it is you in full cooperation in with our loving spirits that we are 60 seconds seeking here and that we are opening to in this moment. We thank you so much, and we say this prayer now in your name, in the name of the Ascended Masters, our love-centered guides and friends, in the name of each and every person listening to this show today. Thank you, dear God, and so it is. Amen. Guys, thank you again. I love you dearly, and we'll see you next Sunday before Thanksgiving, at 10 a.m. Eastern Standard Time on Sunday. Take care of yourself now, and have a wonderful, wonderful week. Bye-bye.